Good morning, and welcome to another Seize the Day. At this hotel that I'm staying here in Sorrento, Italy, I found they had this little walkway that you could walk down these stairs, and it's hugging the side of the cliff. And so I'm going to just take this with me a little bit and kind of show you where I'm standing. Like there is this cliff you can see from behind me. With me, and you can see how beautiful this setting truly is. So it's pretty quiet. People are up there on the top. Nobody even knows that I'm down here. Probably not even my wife. She's up there taking a shower. But you can see I found this little walkway, and you just come down, and it's just you and me this morning. So I'm gonna put my computer down, and we'll spend some time looking at the scripture this morning. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity that you and I have to come together and share the word. It's such a beautiful setting for me this morning, and I get to share it with you. So I'm grateful for that. Well, today is Friday, October 20th, and I hope that you're waking up and feeling refreshed and ready to begin this new day. We have been in a study in the book of Deuteronomy, and in Deuteronomy, we are in a series called Turn Up the Volume, which is just taking a look at the way in which Moses has been dealing with all of the children that have come out of the Exodus. So so what we're finding now is that Moses is giving them instruction on how they are going to live in this land that God is going to give to them. So we find ourselves now in Deuteronomy chapter 5. And in Deuteronomy chapter 5, here we find a number of passages that are dealing with just the idea of the Ten Commandments right now. Moses is about to reiterate what God had given to their forefathers over 40 years ago. And we see that this word that God has given to them, well, that word is coming from the God who remains the same yesterday, today, and forever. And this covenant that God is making with them, these 10 commandments, are always, to be in effect. Every generation after them, God is going to use this as a way for them to draw near to him and for him to draw near to them. If they were to abide by these commandments, if they would use them as a guide for the way in which they were to live and interact, he says it would go well with you in the land, and you would live long. And so what we find then in these passages is that God is also making some statements. And one of the things that I brought to your attention, I hope clearly in these past couple of days, is that God's commandments were designed to protect and preserve their new freedoms. In other words, when God now is speaking to them about these 10 commandments, they're couched in their recent experience, right? They have been wandering through this desert now for 40 years. And prior to that, for over 400 years, they were a people now who we have come to see, right? They are people now that have been enslaved for over 400 years. And so part of this enslavement now is seen in the way in which they are being prepared for what is going to come. Think about it. If you don't have any real sense of what it means to live free, when the constant past that you have grown up with, that has been communicated to you through generations prior, everyone, all they knew was slavery in Egypt. And now God is saying, I'm going to give you freedom. I'm going to give you land. I'm going to bring prosperity to you. There is going to be an abundance of posterity, right? Like your descendants are going to be truly increasing and many. I'm going to bless you. Well, how are they going to deal with that blessing? One of the interesting things to me has been to go out and sometimes read articles on those who have won the lottery. You would think that making all this money would solve everybody's problems, but in many ways, it just made their problems worse. And so the fact that they are going to be blessed financially, economically, spiritually, you know, just in terms of their own community, all of these things now are going to have an effect on the way in which they are going to treat one another and the way they treat God. And if they were broken before they got here, how do you think that's going to manifest itself? It's like this: if you were raised with nothing, you could, if you're not careful, you could have a tendency to hold on to things, right, and to find your sense of identity and security in the things that you have, right? If you grew up in an environment where perhaps it was not that affirming, you're always looking for ways to be affirmed. Like, it's just a part of what happens in one's background and now is being manifested in the future. And it's no different for these Israelites. They had a lot of things to contend with. I'm sure there were a lot of just personal issues that needed to be addressed, and God is giving them away. These 10 commandments then were designed to protect and preserve these new freedoms. And so we began to take a look at those, right? We kind of went through most of them yesterday, and then towards the end I got a little rushed. But just think about the first 4 of these commandments that have to deal with people's relationship to God and how that works itself out. And then so that they have no other gods before me. You make no idols. You don't misrepresent me before the people. You remember the Sabbath day so that there is a rhythm to your life. And then he talks about how we are to deal with one another in a horizontal fashion. And it was all about honoring your mother and father as the Lord your God commanded, so that you may live long and it may go well with you in the land your God is giving you. Because their free society was to be structured around the network of viable extended family households. So it wasn't just father and mother as we think today in our little nuclear family, but this was the extended families. You see that even now, tragically, as you see what's happening over in Gaza, and how that is so disruptive, not just to the nuclear family, but to that whole extended family, people who are living together. And it's heart-wrenching to watch. And we just pray every day that God would bring a swift conclusion to all of this animosity there. But from there, this idea of murder, you shall not murder, freed from such murderous tyranny, they were to protect human life from unlawful killing, right? The Israelites knew what it was like to aggressively be sought after in this state-sponsored program of selective genocide that you saw the Egyptians, implementing. And then what about this home that was supposed to be, a sanctuary, right? Honor your father and mother. Now it's saying here to those fathers and mothers, hey, maintain sexual integrity. You shall not commit adultery. Why? Because God understands it's going to scar your family. And not just your family, those scars will be seen not only within the community, emotionally, economically. Come on, so many times in our cities right now, many sociologists, they look back, and these aren't even believers, right? But they'll go back and see the disintegration of the family as being one of the causes for kids not going to high school, finishing high school. The poverty rates going through the roof, the violence in the streets, because the home is insecure. And very often, I'm telling you, it could, this sense of rampant, unbridled passion can really destroy families. And next thing you know, you have all these fatherless children, children being raised without fathers, and it becomes a burden on single moms, on a community. Yeah, it's just not good. And God is saying right now, look, you guys get a fresh start. You're getting to start all over again. So you should not commit adultery. You should not steal, right? You may never have really experienced what it was like to have your own stuff, but you're going to have your own stuff, and your neighbor's going to have his own stuff, and you got to learn how to respect one another's stuff, right? They had been economically exploited, And now God's intention was for them to have a land of their own, a distinct economic system within which theft seriously would violate the community dimension of this covenant. And then he says, don't bear false witness against your neighbor, right? Because this, the injustices of that, how that can just tear at the very fabric of trust. We see that being eroded even in our days, right? You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not set your desire on your neighbor's house or land, his manservant, maidservant, ox, donkey, anything that belongs to your neighbor. So here, you notice here, it says here, you should not set your desire. So stealing is actually taking something, right? But when you set your desire on what someone else has, that sense of envy, that sense of jealousy, the malice that can come from all of that brings such an unsettledness into a person's life that the next thing you know, there is all this disharmony that's taking place. God's saying, look, I'm bringing into a land. There's plenty for everybody. Just treat one another fairly. And Jesus then would take all of these things and he would summarize them even more when he would say, listen, all of the commandments are summarized in this. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. He says, upon these, all the law and the prophets hang. Because God knows those two things right there, if love is what is motivating us behind all these things, if you violate them, you're quick to repent. You're quick to say, I'm sorry. If you're the one that's offended, then you're also being quick to extend grace and forgiveness 70 times 7 if necessary, because we're all works in progress. This was never about 10 commandments that we had to scrupulously hold on to and then receive God's blessing. Remember, they've already been freed. They've already been given the opportunity to engage in this promised land through nothing that they did on their own. It was all God's grace that did it for them. So you're not earning God's love. We're responding to that. We're responding to who he is and what he has done. And now he's giving us ways to respond. Honor these commandments here, these laws and decrees, so that your life would go well. And we can see what happens when they are violated. A sense of contentment was supposed to be fostered here. The past deprivation should never be an excuse for never being satisfied. Sometimes people are always looking to the past and say, well, this happened to me and that happened to me. And well, if you know enough to recognize what happened, then you should also recognize that there's an opportunity here to grow. And I'm not saying that those things are always easy, because you know what I love that text in Corinthians. It says, whatever overcomes a man, by that he becomes, and in Peter it says, whatever overcomes a man, by that he becomes enslaved. Or in Corinthians, when it says, lay aside every encumbrance and the sin that so easily entangles us, and run with endurance the race marked out before you. That's what we have to do. Every single one of us has a hindrance, an encumbrance that we have to put behind us. There's going to be something in our past that we could use as an excuse for moving forward. But it only violates the community dimension of this covenant that God has with us. And so he wants us to see these 10 commandments as a way to protect and preserve their new freedoms. And this was to be reflected in their social structures. So, having said that now, why don't we just take a few moments that are left to us this morning. And I want you to think about these 10 commandments from another angle. I want you to think about these 10 commandments as how they inform us about what matters most to God. Do you think about that? Like, these commandments were given, as we just said, they were designed to protect and preserve these new freedoms that they were going to be beginning to express in this new land. They're on the verge now of this whole new opportunity. And now God's saying, okay, before you march out there, I want to give you some guidelines here so that it would go well with you, that you would experience my favor, my blessing, and that together you would represent me well to the world. because the ultimate goal here is that through you, the world would be blessed. People would see again what they have in their rebellion turned away from. God wants them to understand who he is. They want to understand what his heart is for his people. And now Israel was supposed to be this living example of what that was supposed to look like. But in the giving of the Ten Commandments, as much as they are for us to protect us and preserve these freedoms, they're also saying something about what matters most to God, don't they? So I want you to think about that with me, and then let's go back and just kind of look through these passages, because this God is giving us an architectural design, right? A theological platform on which to build one's life upon. And I want you to notice the sequence that you find in this text. In the commandments 1 to 3, right? Isn't it always about God first? That the more you get to know who he is, don't rely on visual or any verbal abuses. I'm always amazed when people will start saying things to me like, well, God is love, so God wouldn't do this and God wouldn't do that. And you're like, okay, I'm looking at scriptures here, and if they say, well, if God was love, then all these bad things wouldn't happen. I'm like, well, then you really don't understand the scriptures, because the reason why bad things are happening is because this world is broken. The reason why bad things are happening is because this world is in judgment against or in rebellion against the things of God. He's been trying over and over again to bring his people back into covenant with him, and we have resisted on multiple levels. We're chasing after other gods, whether it's the gods of ambition or education, right, or physical health, or beauty, what strength, whatever it is. You just exchange God's authority for something else. We've been doing that forever. And so here, God's saying, look, you want to know what matters to me? What matters to me, first off, is that you and we're on the same page, that we're in covenant with each other, that we love one another, that when you're in harmony with the one who created all of these things, it's going to be good for you. So when I read these commandments, it's not just so much what it's doing to protect me from the world's, effects here, right? Preserving my life, giving me a safe guideway, but what it's also doing for me, it's also demonstrating to me what matters most to God. And what he's saying is, first and foremost, is my relationship with him. That's why Jesus says, listen, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength is the greatest commandment. Because if you do that, it puts you in a position to be instructed and corrected, rebuked sometimes, trained sometimes, so that you become fully equipped as this child of God to represent him well in the world and experience something of that peace that God promises us. It's not going to happen if God is just one among many. No. He has to come first. And God is saying that here. This is what matters. What matters is the relationship that we have with him. Second, it also is, notice, the health and benefit for society as a whole. This redemptive act that God did of bringing Israel out of Egypt, out of this land of slavery, right? Where he says, listen, 6 days you are to work. The seventh day, I want you to rest because I gave you rest. Well, now we begin to see that the society as a whole, there needs to be a rhythm to this. And God is looking at society now and finding ways that we are not adding to people's anxieties and adding to people's stresses. And we see how we do that in our brokenness all the time, don't we? People ripping one another off, unkind, short. I mean, 1,001 ways that we do this to each other. And yet I think this Sabbath rest was supposed to be this spiritual alignment that just in the constant course of a week would remind everyone again of the great benefits that we have in serving a God who would go out of his way to make sure that he delivered his people. Not only now is it God first and this idea of society, but what about the centrality of the family, right? You know, from from honoring your father and mother to do not commit adultery. God saying the family unit here is really important to me. So the society as a whole, and now the families in particular, and within that there is this what seems to matter to God is this whole idea of human life. People matter more than things, and so thou shalt not murder. How about the individual rights to material and personal property? It's another bedrock here for God. He's saying, listen, I'm giving you these things, but I just want you to handle them well. I want you to respect other people's properties. I want you to respect your own. I want you to work hard for what you get, but I don't want you to envy and become jealous of those around you, because it'll push you in a wrong direction. And the next thing you know, you're going to have all kinds of insecurities, all kinds of real brokenness that's going to be shown in your life, because you're always trying to keep up with the neighbor next door. You're always comparing your kids to somebody else's, or somebody else's wife to your wife, or like a husband to their husband. Yeah, it never works out well. And so here, when you look in this text, doesn't it say, "Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's stuff"? This is saying to you what matters to God. And then truthfulness. It's what's going to preserve justice. Telling truth one to another. Sometimes the truth is hard. I've had many conversations with my wife where she has put me on notice, and I'm grateful for that. Maybe not in the moment, well, honestly, never at the moment, but usually in reflection, I'm grateful that God brought somebody into my life that is speaks the truth, and she has been receptive when I have done the same for her. So think about it: God first, society, family, life, individual rights and property, truthfulness. That God is saying to us in these commandments, this is what is ultimately important. So, as I finish here, I want to read a quote to you, and this quote I have found in a commentary by a man named Christopher Wright. He wrote this commentary on the book of Deuteronomy, and notice what he says here. He says, God's priorities for human moral attention are God, society, the extended family, life, sex, property. It hardly needs to be pointed out that in Western society, at least, modern culture has almost precisely inverted this order of priorities, having built a whole ideological worldview on breaking the 10th commandment. It is hardly surprising that we have trampled over the preceding ones until the first, shall have no other gods before me, is virtually meaningless. Why call on people to worship no other God when most would claim to worship no God at all? Wow, isn't that a mouthful? It's because we've inverted this order. We are so much of our marketing, right? Social media, everything feeds into this desire, setting our desire on something other than God Himself. And the media and everything conspires to make it seem like a person who is really trying to live for God, somehow or another, they're backward, they're unintelligent, they're not progressive. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at having this peace that reigns within your own soul, and realizing that money can't buy that, positions can't buy that. When you want to be blessed, when you're looking across the table at your family and your extended family, and you feel like there's this harmony and love that exists between you, when even though you might be struggling, you recognize that you have a God who promises never to leave you or forsake you. When on the early part of this vacation, I was really getting pretty sick, and I I I always pride myself on being pretty strong and go to it. Like, um, it's the rare thing. Like even when I'm sick, I still go out for walks and I do things because I kind of feel like if I get the blood going, it'll be good for me. But I'm telling you, I was laid out. And then all that anxiety started coming over my head, thinking, what am I going to do for my wife right now? Like I don't want to leave her on her own here by herself, and I want to take care of her. And then I'm thinking about, okay, well, who do I call? What doctor do I see? I'm not in the States anymore, and then I remember just laying there and this anxiety just beginning to mount. And then I just said, wait, whoa, chill out here. I'm called to cast all my anxiety upon him because he cares for me. I am to be anxious for nothing, but in everything, through prayer and petition, let my requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God that passes all understanding will guard my heart and my mind in Christ Jesus. I am to think on things that are true and noble, good, pure, holy, right? Excellent, praiseworthy. I'm to think on these things. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, God. You're the same God that was with me in New Hampshire, and you're the same God here in Italy. Just give me some direction, show me where to go. And we had a couple of conversations, and the next thing you know, I found this wonderful Italian doctor that came to the hotel, gave me a few injections, prescribed some medications for me. And within a few days after that, at least I was well enough to start getting up and walking around. But I had over 4 days of not having anything. And in the first day or so, not even water. I wasn't feeling great. But I'm telling you, in that moment, I just began to realize again, no matter what my circumstances are, God is going to be for me. So that's why I can have no other one before him. I have to keep him front and center in my head, because that's going to be the center that's going to make everything else fall into alignment. And here I am now feeling much better. And you and I are spending some time in the Word in a beautiful part of the country, of this world. And it's all because of this mindset that we shall have no other gods before him, that we shall love him with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love our neighbors ourselves. See, God's heart is behind these commandments. And these specific commandments are meant for us to experience his love and to flourish, to enjoy his protection and preservation. But it also is meant to remind us of what is most important. Because when we know God and experience his work in us, it's all the motivation we need to love him and to love others. My friends, thank you so much for a great week. I am very, very thankful to spend this time with you. And I trust that this morning was a good one. Again, I hope you enjoy this whole setting. And so I am looking forward to next in a day. We're finishing up our trip by going to Rome. I hope it doesn't rain, because we had a tour that was going to take us to the Roman Colosseum late at night, and they were going to bring us down to where Christians were held and just experienced so much atrocity by Nero. I know a lot about that history, and I wanted to go there and just experience that as I stood in these walls that one time brought about such destruction. And just to see how God, in his providence, he wins the day. Caesar is no longer in control. And one day this world will bend the knee and exclaim that Jesus is Lord. My friends, God bless you. Thank you so much for being a part of our Seize the Day family. Make sure you share this page with others, just to remind them again why it's so important for us to love him and love neighbor. And as always, just seize the day, remembering that God is good all the time. God bless you. Lord willing, we'll spend some more time on Monday.